My name is Joel Caesar. I'm with the City of Santa Monica's Office of Sustainability. I'm the Sustainable Building Advisor, so I've been deeply involved in developing this new ordinance, the Reach Code, to our Green Building Ordinance. And I'll get into some of the specifics about what led to us approaching and endeavoring to do what we're doing with the ordinance. And then Megan and Chris here were part of the team that helped us develop the analysis that was utilized to put it in place. And Megan specifically will dig into the details a little bit. But before we start, what I'd like to do, I want to see who we have in the audience. I don't want to spend too much time, but I think this is a small enough group that we can learn who everybody is quickly. But this is a USGBC-LA event, and we want to make sure that everyone's aware of the great things that the local US Green Building Council does. And specifically, you're in the Westside branch territory of the USGBC-LA. So we have fortunate enough to have Erin Hammett, who is with the City of Santa Monica, and also the co-chair of the Westside branch of USGBC-LA. So she'd like to do a little bit of an introduction to that work.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. We hope there's a lot of industry representatives in the room that are excited about this Reach Code. And additionally, I would like to encourage any of you, if you want to take more of a leadership role in the Westside community, to let me know. We set up events just like this all over town to expand our education, our networking, and our recognition for green building projects. And our next event in May is May 11th, and it's to tour the LEED Gold Luskin Center project at UCLA. So if anyone's interested, look for that, and I will give you more information. So come find me. Thank you for coming.
The idea here tonight is I'm going to do a brief presentation on the Office of Sustainability and where this motivation comes from to do innovative work like the ZNE ordinance, and briefly touch on what the ordinance is and how we got to this point. And then I'm going to transition to Megan, who's with TRC Consultants, who was the consulting firm that helped us with our analysis to submit to the California Energy Commission, which allows us to implement energy codes which are more stringent locally. So Megan and her team really did a lot of the nuts and bolts work to analyze the financial impact on our community to require an ordinance that seeks greater levels of efficiency than the state. So Megan will do more of the details of what led to the cost effectiveness conclusion, and like I said, I'm going to do a bit of an overview. And the idea here is I'm going to go quick. That was really good, by the way. We did that in 10 minutes. I'm hoping to be 5 to 10 minutes, and then Megan will be 10 to 15, which will hopefully give us about 45 minutes of Q&A. So there'll be a panel. I guess I probably should have rewound. You might have noticed if you signed up, there was supposed to be 4 panelists in addition to myself. Of course, we only have 2. Ron Takaguchi, our building official, who is instrumental to this work and enforcing it, maybe probably the most important job in relation to this ordinance, couldn't attend. As the building official, there's always too much work to be done and an overburdened staff. And then Ruby, who's a local consultant with Partner Energy and heavily involved with CABEC from the energy modeling side, she's stuck in traffic. So hopefully she'll be here in a minute, but I think we have enough energy consultants and energy modeling people in the room that they can fill her role in the panel. So when we get to the panel, I'll do a couple quick questions to these guys to get it going, but then we really love the audience to drive the conversation. So with that, let me get started on my part. So I start with this slide because it's like, why? Why are we doing what we do in Santa Monica? I work in the Office of Sustainability. I'm in charge of the Green Building Program. I'm a member of a team who all specialize in different aspects of sustainability. But ultimately, we get these very large, long-term, ambitious goals from our City Council that we have to implement programs and policies to help achieve. And our most recent announcement was that Council wants us to achieve carbon neutrality citywide by 2050. And to do that, it requires us to do very innovative work on a much more urgent time frame than the region and the country is prepared for. So a lot of times when we do a talk like this, or I'm out in the community describing our goal of the ZNE ordinance, people's reaction might be mixed, but sometimes it's, are you guys crazy? Is the technology there? Is the cost there? Is this possible? And all those answers are yes, and then ultimately it's up to us to prove and to choose the best route to all get to these council goals. So ZNE for single family construction, which is what we're here tonight to mostly talk about, and our 10% Reach Code for commercial are small tools we have in this long-term goal towards carbon neutrality. I know new construction, I get this point out to me a lot. Why you focus on new construction? The majority of buildings in Santa Monica that you need to impact are existing. We know that, and we'll get there, but for now we're focused on getting this into place as efficiently as possible. So this is me. I love to surf, so it's kind of just the introduction to more than just a green building advisor here in Santa Monica. And from a timeline, so this is on our website, and I know it's a little bit confusing. We implemented a solar ordinance last year, and that was just for a couple months because once the state codes changed as of January 1st, we were no longer allowed to implement Reach codes because when the state codes change, you have to go through this cost-effectiveness study again and prove to CEC that you validated everything that you're working on that is relative to the new energy code. So we had to sunset the solar code until it goes back into effect on May 1st, where the solar requirement will go into effect with the Energy Reach Code as of May 1st, so a couple weeks from now. And then, we like to point out that although ZNE is a very impressive goal that we're proud of being able to implement here, we think cost effectively, it's not that far out from the rest of the state. So we like to point out the state will require ZNE for all new single-family homes statewide in 2020. So Santa Monica has a history and a reputation from being a little bit ahead of the state and other communities when it comes to sustainability objectives, and this is just another example of that. So in context, to kind of think about again these larger goals, we believe we're the first city in the world to publish a sustainable city plan in 1994. We have carbon neutrality by 2050. We're endeavoring to be water self-sufficient by 2020. We have a goal to be zero waste by 2030. So these are the motivations that drive the work of the Office of Sustainability and how we collaborate with our community and other departments to make it all happen. And tonight we're focusing on these mandatory solar for new construction and our ZNE Reach Code for 2017. So we have this original Sustainable City Plan in 1994, and then in 2013 we published a 15 by 15 action plan to start getting some more goals in place to reduce our emissions by 2015, which we successfully did. And this puts us on trajectory, so if you think we're here at 2015, we just crossed this line of 15% below 1990 levels by 2015. So we achieved that. But if you're looking at carbon neutrality, look at the curve, look at the slope of that curve. That was a fairly respectable curve to get to 2015. We had to do some serious work to get there. This is an old slide. This shows 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. We need this actually to traject straight down to cross the x-axis by 2050 to be carbon neutral. So I use this slide to demonstrate that really nothing's off the table for us. If we want to hit this goal, which council has told us to hit, we got to think very innovative across all sectors of our city, including new construction. I love showing this slide. Garrett, who's in charge of our climate action plan, he uses this when he presents. But even if there are folks in this crowd who don't think we should be making an effort to address climate change, the city feels there's many other co-benefits that we'll get by implementing the type of programs that we do to try to achieve climate mitigation. So I don't think I need to spend too much time. We have probably a friendly audience for the slides here today, but for those who don't, we have lots of other things that occur once we approach carbon neutrality. And real quick, this is just a great slide Gary uses as well, that what we've learned since 1990 is over time, as we've implemented what always seemed like stringent and rigorous government overreach when we implement them initially, ultimately have led to positive growth in other sectors of our citywide economy. So we show that even at the same time we are reducing natural gas and electricity emissions for residential and commercial, we're growing in sales, we're growing in jobs, we're growing in population. So the idea that we can decouple economic growth and happiness in our community from reducing emissions is a really powerful argument. The nuts and bolts, we're here tonight. We're talking about mandatory solar. That's not really the focus of tonight because that's been in place since May of last year, but all new construction in Santa Monica, either residential or commercial, is required to install some level of solar on the new project. I can get into details if we have questions, but tonight we're going to focus more on the Reach Code, which will be brand new as of May 1st, which is ZNE for all new single-family residential construction, and a 10% Reach Code for all non-res construction. The solar requirement works like this. We require 1.5 watts per square foot of gross square footage for a single-family home to be installed. It doesn't have to be roof-mounted. It can be site-mounted. And then for multifamily and commercial, so anything 2 stories or above, it's based on the building footprint. So it requires 2 watts of solar generation per square foot of the footprint. So if you have a 4-story, 40,000 square foot office building, has about a 10,000 square foot floor plate, then you would be required to install a 20 kilowatt system. And I know this isn't a presentation-friendly slide, but just wanted to make sure that we're going to talk a lot about ZNE and the Reach Code tonight. But specifically, if you really want to know what the language lives in our municipal code, this is exactly how it's written. Sadly, right now, if you go on the Santa Monica website, we have not been able to publish this under our municipal code yet, and there's just reasons, website and legal reasons we can't publish it yet, but we're going to have this on the Office of Sustainability website very shortly, and here's the language. But basically, what we're doing is, when we first met with TRC to think about a REACH code for the 2016 Energy Code cycle, we had a feeling we might be able to make a justification for ZNE in Santa Monica cost effectively during this code cycle ahead of the state. And TRC was quick to point out, okay, if you want ZNE, and this was a year ago, they said there's 16 definitions of what is net zero energy, right? And I've heard since I've done this presentation, people have pointed out there's probably 20. So we landed on using the definition that's from Cal Green. So right now in 2016 Cal Green, there's Tier 1, there's Tier 2, and there's Tier 3 energy performance. The Tier 3 is brand new in 2016, and that defines what is ZNE. So our effort, our goal, and this was Ron Takaguchi, the building official, was very adamant about this objective, is to align our enforcement and our code language as closely as possible to what the CEC wants, what the CEC plans to do in 2019, and what the current Cal Green language states now. So that's why this language might look very familiar, because it's from Cal Green. And my last slide is basically that I want to emphasize for homeowners or for folks working with potential homeowners in Santa Monica and broaching the conversation about ZNE and asking, does the city provide any resources? We are working very intently on providing more resources. This was recently published on our website. We have a ZNE guide specific to Santa Monica construction and climate that was produced by the New Buildings Institute. So I encourage you to go on our website. It's a great document. It digs into the cost-effective measures that TRC identified. New Buildings Institute translated them into design and construction speak. So we think it's a great document, a lot of pictures and a lot of graphs, and I encourage everyone to use it. And then we'll also be rolling out an Energy Code coach, thanks to our friends with the Center for Sustainable Energy. We're going to have someone sitting in our building department office once a week who will be there to advise the community and homeowners and architects, and also be a bridge between our building and safety officials and the community. So those are two resources we have coming down, and we're also working with SoCalGas on developing a couple how-to videos, how to energy model, how to think about ZNE, how to think about high performance design. Kind of our overarching argument to new homeowners who are proposing to build in Santa Monica is, we're not asking to change dramatically the architecture of what you otherwise would be building in your dream home in Santa Monica. We're asking you to maybe engage an energy consultant a little earlier. To maybe ask your architect to talk to their energy modeler earlier in the process. We're trying to shift the design further to the start, where you engage the energy consultant, because there are pretty simple and we think cost-effective approaches you can add to what otherwise would be the basic design. If you start the conversation earlier, that means it can all be more cost-effective. So we're going to provide tools and resources and try to make it collaborative with our community. And with that, that's how you find me. And I'll put the slide back up before we close here. But I'd like to introduce Megan with TRC Energy Consultants. I give a brief background how they've worked with us for almost a year now on the development of this REACH code, and she's going to give more background on the cost-effectiveness analysis. And TRC does work statewide with the various investor-owned utilities on these programs. So she's a wealth of knowledge, and please welcome her.
All right, just to give a brief intro, I'm Megan Dye. I'm Associate Project Manager with TRC Energy Services. And thanks for having me today. It's pouring rain in the Bay Area, so this is lovely for me. We'll get started. I'm going to go through this pretty briefly, but I'll also give it to Joel to send out as well. And stop me if I say anything or an acronym that you're not familiar with. CEC is California Energy Commission. They're the head honcho that basically directs everything. All right. So what we'll go over today, I will hit both residential and non-residential. I know everyone's really interested. Residential is the ZNE, but we also do have the non-residential piece, so don't forget about that. So there's a lot on this slide. This goes back to basically what Joel said, is that the ZNE definition that Santa Monica adopted came out of Cal Green. They didn't create their own ZNE definition. They use one that's consistent with what the state has adopted. Cal Green is part of Title 24, Part 11. So the residential It covers low-rise residential, single-family, and your low-rise multifamily, so those are 3 stories and below. And you're required to do 15% compliance margin of energy efficiency, and then meet an EDR of equal to or less than 0. So kind of what that means is first, let's add on efficiency, improve the energy efficiency of our building, reduce the load it needs, and then install PV to offset the energy use of that building. And when we say energy, we're talking about the state's definition of energy, which is electricity, natural gas, and propane. And that is how ZNE on the state level is defined, that you install PV to offset your total energy use. And we won't get into the TDV metric too much, but if you guys have questions on that, I think a lot of people in the audience are energy consultants and are familiar. But basically what TDV is, time-dependent valuation. The state values energy based on when it's used. So if you think a hot summer day, when you have your AC on and everybody else in the state has their AC on, that kilowatt is valued higher than, let's say, in the middle of winter or on a nice, mild spring day. So that's basically kind of a sense of what TDV means. And currently, the PV is installed on your site, on your building. There aren't any provisions in Cal Green that account for RECs, which are renewable energy credits, or things you can purchase renewable energy, basically. All right, so energy design rating, what's this thing we keep talking about? This is, for 2016, a new metric that the CEC is rating and scoring buildings on. It's very similar to an HERS index, which is a national index, national scaling, and it basically tells you how your proposed project is doing up against a reference home. And that reference home is a 2006 International Energy Conservation Code compliant home. It's the same thing as a HERS index. So basically what it means is if you get a score of 50, your home is pretty much using 50% of the energy needed for that same home compliant with 2006 IECC. And for reference, where's a SantaMonica code compliant home hitting? Where are you needing to get down to 0 from? We found it's between 50 and 55 for a totally code compliant home with 0% compliance margin. So you're already making 15%, your score is going to go down, and then you put on PV, get to 0. Great. All right, so how do we show this? I know, there are all these rules, and now how, as an energy consultant or an architect or anyone working on a project, how do I see if my project is going to be hitting the zero net energy goals? So this is pretty small, but this is all coming out of the California approved or CEC approved software. So anyone who's a Title 24 consultant who's worked with the software, this is what we've been using for a really long time. That percent compliance. This particular building is 19%. You're aiming for 15%. After that, you have pretty detailed inputs you can have for your PV system. You can alternatively just use the defaults, and that we can get into the defaults if anyone has questions on that. So you put in your PV system, and then you get your final proposed EDR, and you want that to be 0. So no calculations needed on your part. It's all out of the software, and this is what you would give the building department. They would, check you off. Good job. You can go build now. All right. So how do we achieve it? This slide on the bottom here. These are different climate zones, and I don't have. There's 12 climate zones in California. Or sorry, there's 16. I have a handful here. The main point is that this is SantaMonica, Climate Zone 6. This is total energy use of a code-compliant home, single-family home, code-compliant. In the dark shading, these are things that can be regulated under Title 24, where you can get that 15% compliance. The majority, more than 50% of this, is unregulated under Title 24. You don't need to know what that means. The big item, the takeaway from this, is that there are no one-hit measures where you can install this in your building and you're going to hit 15%. It's going to take a lot of work in a lot of small places for you to get that 15% because energy use is so low, because each code cycle we're getting more and more efficient. Your projects aren't using as much energy, and Climate Zone 6 is so mild, there's not a lot of energy use to begin with. So, achieving it. This is what we call kind of our loading order. You want to reduce consumption first. So, optimal orientation. Are you putting your home in a place where there's going to be a lot of direct sunlight coming in from your windows and giving you more heat load? Your envelope, are you having good insulation, very tight, low leakage buildings? Then once you've reduced your energy load as much as you can, meet that load efficiently. Pick efficient heating and cooling systems, your domestic hot water systems, and how those systems distribute your hot and cold air, your water to the home. Lastly, a big one, there's a lot of HERS verifications. So this is coming in and making sure your installers did a really good job putting that insulation in, and there aren't any big gaps and leakage into the home. And there's a plethora of HERS verifications to just make sure your building's really constructed to top quality. And then lastly, once you've reduced your load and you're meeting it efficiently, you're going to add on your renewables. And if you do all the first 3 steps really well, your renewable system can be smaller. And you size that PV system to meet EDR 0. And what we found in our analysis, because the CEC and the state uses that TDV value where we say energy is really valued high during high peak times, and your PV happens to also be generating electricity during that high peak times, your system to offset your energy use is smaller than it would be if it had to actually offset the total just energy use of the building, disregarding when that energy is used. I know that's a little bit complicated, so I'm happy to answer more questions on that later. And then I think we're jumping in. So this is our cost effectiveness analysis. I won't spend too much time on this. This is in the report. But basically we actually found 19% to be cost effective. The ordinance is requiring 15%. These are the measures we used. One big thing you're going to see is why didn't we install a better heating and cooling system? That is not something that Title 24 can actually regulate, and that's not something we used to develop the Reach codes. It's definitely something you can put into all of your projects. Water heating systems and HVAC systems are not something regulated under any Title 24 or Reach code. So these are, these aren't the only measures you can do. These are a handful that we use for the analysis. And you can see also this home meeting 19%, needed a 3.7 kilowatt PV system to meet EDR 0. Great. And the same thing, the low-rise multifamily. One thing I didn't put on the last slide, there are a lot of measures here. So this goes back to that slide where we looked at the energy use in Climate Zone 6. A lot of little measures getting you to that 15%. There's no real, low-hanging fruit anymore. And this multifamily, this is an 8-unit multifamily building, and it's requiring about 16 kilowatt PV system to meet EDR 0. Great. And so now a little bit on the non-residential side. This one's a bit simpler. All non-residential buildings, and that includes high-rise residential, so 4 stories and above, are meeting 10% compliance margin. The Reach Code, the Energy Efficiency Reach Code doesn't integrate any required PV, but there is the PV ordinance that SantaMonica has adopted. And same kind of deal, achieving that first reduce your load and then select efficient equipment to meet that load. A big one you'll see on here that is not on the res side is daylighting and lighting. Anybody who's familiar with the energy code and the software, you can't specify your lighting on the res side. You get no credit for having efficient lighting. You get no credit for using daylighting. It's great to do. Everybody loves it. Makes everyone happy. But it's only something that's allowed on the non-residential side. So that's a big one too. I believe there's some kind of thing coming out that heating is one of our top loads, but lighting is the biggest one in the commercial sector. So that's a big one to look at. And then these are the measures we use. You can see 3 out of 5 are lighting measures, and then a couple more just to get us to the 10%. Same kind of deal. There's no one measure that's really going to get you all the way there. It's doing a lot of little things and making sure that building is designed and built well. All right, and that's it. So I think I got through that pretty fast.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
Or should we just open it for questions?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna, if we can wait, I was gonna tee up the panel and ask you guys questions, but since we have a small panel and it's probably gonna have an engaged audience, maybe we'll just go over to the audience. But we should first let Chris introduce himself. So.
Okay. All right, you guys are probably wondering what I'm doing up there. So, my name is Chris, and I'm with Southern California Edison, and I'm part of the Codes and Standards Reach Code program. And what we do is we're a statewide program, and we help jurisdictions like the city of Santa Monica we support them in their pursuit of reach codes. So, there's lots of cities out there in the state of California that are looking to be leaders in this area, and we help them develop the cost effectiveness studies that are supported or that are sent to the CEC, like the one Joel mentioned earlier. So we help support those type of activities. We also develop resources that would help jurisdictions actually adopt these new ordinances. So sample ordinance template language. So we help cities come up with that. And and all this is in support of the sustainability goals of set by the state of California.
So yeah, I can't speak enough about Edison's support of this endeavor. Santa Monica had to really outlay very little resources because of Edison's involvement working directly with TRC. So we wouldn't be here working on this without Edison. So thanks, Chris. And yeah, like I said, I was hoping to get the panel going with a few questions, but I think since we only have a panel of two, and it seems like there's already questions, we'll open up to the floor. I will, if there's a gap, I can always drive the conversation, but I think, like I said, we want to hear from you guys. We dumped a lot of information there. Some of it was really detailed, some of it was very broad. There's probably a lot of opportunity in between to fill in gaps, so let me start with you, sir.
Hi. I'd like you to clarify the comment you made about the efficiency of heating systems is not considered. That seems illogical.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, if you think of embodied energy, right? You're making more solar panels to offset what you could have just had as a more efficient heating system, and in the end had a lower carbon footprint overall, right? So
you're totally correct, and I might have not clarified that as well. So you can 100% take credit for a more efficient heating and cooling system, and you should. What I was saying is when we develop the cost effectiveness analysis, there are rules within CEC and how Title 24 works in terms of those are measures we can't touch because they're actually regulated on the federal level. So Department of Energy sets the efficiency for all heating and cooling systems as well as domestic hot water systems. So for the purposes of this study, we wanted to stay within that realm and make sure that we are doing due justice or due diligence for the City of Santa Monica's cost effectiveness analysis. So definitely when you actually do a building and put in your systems, you're going to get credit for using a more efficient system than what is the federal minimum.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a nuance. We learned a lot in this process of how the energy software, the compliance software interfaces with the code and interfaces with what CEC is allowed to dictate. And the cost effectiveness study is a tool that we have to use, and we use the methodology that CEC provides. And this is one of those issues where, especially on the high-rise multifamily projects, the cost effectiveness around 10% of the 10% reach code was close. And one of the conversations we had with TRC was, we can't put more efficient heating systems as a cost-effective measure in our report as a recommendation. TRC can't, because CEC can't preempt the federal government, which regulates those appliances. That doesn't mean we expect and already see most high-rise multifamily projects in Santa Monica already purchasing more efficient appliances than are stated as kind of code compliant.
And now the federal government will require coal burning for pharmacy.
Yeah, I'm a city employee. I'm not going to get into politics. Sure.
How many single-family projects do you expect during the first year of the implementation of the code?
That's a great question. Over the past 5 years, we average probably 10 to 20 new single-family homes in Santa Monica a year.
What was the question?
Was the question? Yeah.
The question was, how many new single-family homes do we expect to see in Santa Monica over the next year, right?
That was the answer now?
Based on the trajectory of the last 5 years, we see about 10 to 20 new single-family homes a year. Yeah, Nat?
Santa Monica just passed a new accessory unit ordinance, so if I were to apply that to, say, renovation of a garage to have 600 square feet of living space, then I'd be complying with this new code and new PV just for that accessory unit. Is that correct?
That's a good question. That's a question I wish the building official was here for.
Well, I'm just saying in general.
Accessory unit, what
there
defines
seem to
it?
be-
I don't know what defines an accessory
There
unit.
seem to be few opportunities for single family, but that might be many more opportunities given the accessory unit ordinance and the fact that it's been recently redone to be a little more friendly to people looking to do that. That would be many more opportunities in Santa Monica.
It's a good question. It's something that maybe we need to add to the FAQ. You know, one of my goals here tonight is to take the questions you guys give me that I can't answer and put them as our FAQ. But the intent here was to only account for new ground-up single-family homes with the ZNE. So even within new, there's of course a broad definition of where does a major renovation or retrofit turn into new, and how do we define that? I can get into that if people want to know that answer. But these ancillary structures or the redo of the bathroom, you know, those aren't things we're trying to get to trigger this. It's only
But
meant to
the
be
separate garage that is a residence.
separate garage that is a residence.
Now allowed as an accessory unit in Santa Monica. I understand that just a recent change, and I was very happy to hear about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we'll have to find out the answer. Thank you.
So, y'all's news may be better than mine, but I understand that the CEC recently sent a pretty strong signal that the definition for ZNE in the 2020 code is shifting a little bit, and the basics of that, as I understand it, is that they're going to sort of exclude the gas uses from that calculation and land us on an EDR of some positive number that's finance independent, but the numbers I've seen range from like 15s to 20s. So I was just wondering if you guys have a reaction to that, or if you can further explain it.
Yeah, I can share what I know. So yeah, the what you're referring to is the updates for the 2019 Title 24 code. So just to be clear, the things that we're talking about here today are based on the 2016, the current energy code. So this is looking forward to where the CEC thinks they're going to land in the future. You know, there's a lot of things that the CEC is wrestling with when they're trying to define ZNE, and you are correct that they are moving to an EDR number for compliance in order to be compliant with the new code. So that's a little bit of a departure from the methodology that was used for Santa Monica. But this is a very fluid thing, the ZNE thing. Much like, you know, Santa Monica is a leader in what they're doing now with the ZNE code. The state of California is a leader with what they're trying to do statewide for ZNE. So because of that, this is really uncharted territory, and the CEC is doing the best they can with the information that they're getting. You know.
Yeah, I understood. And thanks. If it's okay if I dig a little deeper on that.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
I understand that as the CEC basically trying to grapple with the duck curve problem, the demand response, grade level issue, which is definitely above my pay grade. What I find notable, and I guess concerning to me, within the 4 property lines, what that means is that a number of really legitimately very good technologies and show up in the model as an energy penalty. So for example, there's a heat pump water heater, which is a phenomenally efficient device if it fits the application. Looks like a penalty in the model when compared to something like an 80% efficient gas tankless water heater. So I think I understand enough about the problem that they're trying to solve to know that it's a gnarly problem.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering what's your reaction to the fact that within the property it seems to lead to some bad decisions, and just especially to the homeowner who feels like zero net energy ought to mean $0.
Yeah.
You guys have any thoughts on that, or does it? I mean, especially given that you just fenced your Reach Code on a mean or a zero kind of a definition, does it frustrate you guys that the state's not taking this other direction? I mean, what do you guys think?
Yes, I'll take it first from the city perspective, and that we could make this a slam fest of the CEC. But we're gonna. One of the reasons that I alluded to, we didn't pay for the cost effectiveness study to TRC. Edison was nice enough, it's probably not the right word, but Edison had funds from the state to do an analysis with TRC with Santa Monica as a pilot, in a lot of ways because they are feeling the pressure of 2020 coming and thought in 2015 it would be great to see some of this stuff hit the ground in Santa Monica and begin to look at cost effectiveness and begin to think about how the duct curve's changing and how time of use might change, so that by the time Santa Monica puts their ordinance in place, we have already made some decisions that might be a little different towards 2019. So yes, that's a little frustrating, but again, it's, we think, part of the process. We're definitely very concerned in Santa Monica about the idea that we're out here promoting to our community this is a good thing, this helps us meet these climate action goals. This is going to make your home more valuable, more resilient, and more efficient and cheaper to operate. And then to hear there will be homes that meet our ZNE that don't have a zero bill at the end of the year. And there will be homes that utilize very efficient technologies that are obvious, that they don't get credit for in our modeling software. So I guess the long answer to that is it's somewhat frustrating and it's a learning process, and we are going to adapt with our community and the CEC the best we can moving forward to make sure we get the homes that Santa Monicans deserve. And then if it looks like the changes that roll out from the CEC towards 2019 are that dramatically different than what we're doing here, then we have the opportunity to change. And Megan, you might be able to provide more on sort of this transition period.
Sure. So a couple of things I wanted to do is the duct curve, for anyone who doesn't know, is just because we keep talking about it. It's sort of, when you look at the demand of all of California in an average day or a year, let's go a day, you have all this PV coming online in the middle of the day, utility grade PVs, not counting the stuff on your home. And traditionally that's when we're also using a lot of energy from that 12 to 6 period in the middle of the day in the summer. But now we have all this PV, so great, we're using energy, we have PV that's supplying that energy. But then when we now all get home from work and we're turning our TVs on and we're turning our lights on and charging our EV vehicles, or I guess that's redundant, but whatever, we don't have that PV. So now we're seeing this huge ramp up at the end of the day, and that's what's called, when you look at it, see it all drawn out and just Google duct curve, it looks like a duck. And yeah, so that's what we're talking about, and that's what CC is grappling with, is as we're approaching zero net energy for residential in 2020, and then the big one, commercial, in 2030. There's a lot more commercial square footage that's expected to be built than residential, and that's just a matter of size. So they're sort of, the new buzzword is grid harmonization. They want to make sure that our ZNE goals for the state aren't also going to cause problems for the grid and cause utility grade problems as well. So CC was aware of and in constant communication when we were developing this code, so that this wasn't a huge surprise for them that we were following a definition of zero net energy that at the time was CEC's definition. So we are in line with that. That's the Cal Green definition. And now as they're looking at 2020 and 2030 and beyond, they maybe are now understanding and taking a little bit of a step back. but I don't believe anyone thinks that there's going to be any huge detrimental problems here in Santa Monica for this ordinance going into place. And 2019, we're not looking at PV at all, just looking at the energy efficiency portion. I believe CEC is estimating that is going to be around 15% more compliant than 2016, and that's perfectly in line with what we did with Santa Monica. So. Yeah.
Lindsay?
I would love to hear more about what you were saying you could go into in terms of when a remodel becomes new construction. What threshold is there?
So Santa Monica uses the definition for new construction. It's built into our zoning ordinance. So Chapter 9 of the Santa Monica Municipal Code is our zoning ordinance. New is triggered based on the definition of demolition. And the definition of demolition is when 50% of the external walls are demolished. We then consider that project new.
And so those projects would
Those
apply.
projects would now be on the requirement of the energy code. You want to hear first? Sorry.
So is the net zero for the entire building, or is it just for equipment? Because like, how do you enforce this? Like,
So the net zero is for the whole building, and that's actually one of the slight changes. If people here are residential designers, architects, or even energy consultants, they're probably accustomed, typically single-family homes, at least in Santa Monica, comply with the older versions of the energy code through a prescriptive pathway. So they choose the right windows that are spec'd in the code, they choose the right lights, they choose the right installation level, and it's piece by piece. As long as you hit each piece, you comply. And because of the way we're enforcing this now, it's going to be a whole building approach. So it's a performance pathway. So now to comply with the ordinance, you have to do one of those energy models that Megan had showed. She showed some of the printouts or some of the summary screens that where you get an end percentage. So you input your insulation, your lighting, your orientation, various parameters of the structure into the energy software, and you hit compute, and it goes through a year simulation of what might be weather in Santa Monica during every day, and it gives you a percentage at the end of the year that says this building will perform 10% better than a code compliant building, or 15 or 20%. So our enforcement entity is able. It's really chosen this pathway because it's a simpler approach for our plan checkers. They don't have to dig in every time in drawing and check the insulation, and check the windows, and check the lighting. They get one printout, and if it shows that the home overall is 15% better than the code compliant, and then achieves the rest of that delta between zero net energy and the energy that's now producing, even though it's 15% with solar, then they comply. So that's probably a convoluted way of saying it's easier actually than what we're accustomed to, because it's an energy modeling summary sheet given to our plan checker that they can review very simply.
if there's no one on the site that verifies those equipment were installed?
Well, no, the same process will work as it does now. And plan checkers at the counter approve the design and say go build. And then during construction, we send inspectors out to ensure that the things in the plans are being installed.
It seems like you have two things going at the same time, specifically with solar. So from an application standpoint, if there's a 12,000 square foot house, we got to put 18 kindergarten on the roof. Or, how are we? I think my interpretation is now we have to do as best we can if we can't fit it up there or fit it on the side.
Yeah. If I had the solar requirement specific, I think that's what you're asking about. So, disregard the ZNE, our initial solar, mandatory solar, 1.5 watt per square foot, 12,000 square foot home, which sounds like a great home. Yes, the language does give our building official discretion to grant waivers. We understand, even regardless of size of home and whether or not it's feasible to even produce enough solar on that roof or that site to meet the ordinance, there's also issues like shade and various ways that our zoning requires homes to be oriented in certain neighborhoods to maintain the aesthetic of those neighborhoods. So our building official does have at his discretion the ability to waive and provide some flexibility.
And if I could speak to that real quick too. The PV that we needed for our projects, I believe we found it was like maybe 50% of if you just took a quarter of your roof and assumed that that was in optimal solar access. It was much less than a quarter of your roof, maybe like an eighth of your roof was needed for that system.
Yeah, that's climate zone 6, which is such a one friendly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of the, you know, I probably was too heavily emphasizing the motivation behind this as being cultural and sustainability objectives, but it's also climate related. You know, if anyone in the state's going to do ZNE first, it's Santa Monica with our mild climate and our constant solar exposure. So, yeah, of course. Michael.
I was just going to kind of piggyback off the previous question, the aesthetic side of things. Because Joel's, you know, we love the ocean, we love the surf, and I pay a fortune for my house, and I can see half an inch of that ocean between my neighbor's roof line, you know, out my back windows. What are the regulations going to be in terms of ensuring, A, that neighbor doesn't have a solar array that necessarily blocks my view, or obstructs my ability to put up my own PV array and block my ability to gather sun, things of that nature?
Great question. You guys are asking the tough ones. I wrote that down because it's something I need to expand upon in our FAQ. I don't have a very specific answer from the Office of Sustainability yet. You know, we designed the code, we worked with Building and Safety and Edison to make it cost effective and make sure it works. The nuances of daily plan check and zoning are something we're going to need to coordinate with the new ordinance and our zoning code. I mean, we've already had an example recently where a few residents were concerned about a structure going up that regardless of solar, they were complaining just because it was too high, they thought. And they called us, the Office of Sustainability, and were asking if we could do something because of the solar ordinance and if the solar was going to make it higher. And it was eye-opening to us to recognize, you know, we need to have a better, more clear answer to that question.
Is, just to tag on, right, would the solar panels be included in the normal height limit, or is that something that's allowed to go above the normal height?
That's something that's allowed to go above, and that's in the zoning ordinance. And that was intentional because we, specific to some of the high-rise multifamily projects we're seeing downtown, we want to see solar from the city perspective on those projects, but then we get from the developer side that the amenity of roof access is a big deal, and is there some compromise we can get for some of these canopy roof-mounted solar arrays above the roof decks. So that does allow a lenience on, or variance on the height restriction if it's solar only. Now, you know, from the single-family side, we're going to have to investigate how that occurs.
Are there ZNE protocols for other cities like the South Bay, Long Beach, other cities other than Santa Monica, or is it just Santa Monica only?
I'm not aware of any other cities approaching this ahead of when the state's going to require them to do it in 2020, but I think some of those are Edison territory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's none on our radar right now. There's definitely a lot of interest.
I think Palo Alto is doing it. They spoke at Greenville last year.
Palo Alto, full ZNE Reach Code.
They adopted a Reach Code, but it's just short of ZNE. Yeah.
There's a Solar Rights Act that's on the books that sort of preserves a building's right to access the sun, and so that if you have a solar array now, you're protected from someone obscuring that. But Santa Monica might want to think about the fact that, you know, buildings that yet to be remodeled need to have that right preserved too, because it's a sort of quirky grandfather type law. The one question that came up on our remodel was our south-facing sky was obscured by trees, in our case magnolias. And when we asked the city, that'll remain unnamed, if we could take out those magnolias that were pulling up the sidewalk and that really weren't appropriate for the climate in a lot of ways, they said no, trees are good, you gotta leave them. But that'd be another thing for the city to think about. You could have houses with only east-facing roofs that are workable, and you might need 20% more solar panels to access the east and be net zero. Whereas if you took out trees on the south side and put in maybe appropriate trees for the climate, you could use much less solar. So there are a lot of interesting questions the city should work through.
Definitely, yeah, there's property rights, and Santa Monica has a huge commitment and love for its urban canopy, so, you know, we wouldn't want to see trees removed either, but then we talk about sometimes the trees aren't climate appropriate, but then the community has become accustomed to them, so it's an evolving conversation, and I think another area where the state is really benefiting from Santa Monica pushing the way a little bit so we can see some of these conversations happen and help give them some feedback as to how they plan to respond to this statewide.
Will the energy modeling summary sheet be part of a plan doc, or will it be submitted through the e-plan? How is that going to work?
It's another question where I wish Ron, our
the
building
speaker
official, was
has
here.
on
How does it happen now?
That's how it happens now.
It happens now, so the energy modeling summary sheet is provided through e-plans as a part of the plans, right? Part of the drawings? So, yeah, I guess that's, again, stays the same.
I have a question. So you have this ZNE is like 15% better than the 16 code, and then you have the solar requirement of 1.5 watts per square foot. What did you, how did you calculate that? And my question is, does that 1.5 watt per square foot then also cover like block loads? And I mean, if you talk about 12,000 square foot houses, you probably have like, I don't know, 6 TVs and 3 plugins, and so how do you get to your carbon neutrality and real zero net energy if you don't consider the plug loads, which will, you know, be higher and higher moving forward?
So there's a few questions there. How do we land on 1.5 watts per square foot? So that was a separate process started in late 20 or early 2015 to develop the solar only. Before we were talking about ZNE, we were looking at putting solar in every building that's new in Santa Monica. 1.5 watts per square foot of single family was based on the average size home we see in Santa Monica and where we felt cost effectiveness would land. So we kind of pushed as far as we could on the solar requirements so that it would be feasible with the current technology we have on an average size Santa Monica home and still meet CEC's definition of cost effectiveness. The next question, I think, how does that interact with this 15%? Maybe Megan can answer.
Sure.
I think we probably 1.5 watts, probably more solar than we'll need for ZNE, right?
Yeah, so I think you had 2 questions. Is one, how does the 1.5 watts tie in with the 15% to get us to zero net energy, and then our plug loads considered?
Yeah, that probably also covers something.
Yeah. So the energy design rating, which is what's telling you if you hit 0, that's telling you that you reached the city's definition and Calgreen's definition of zero net energy. That does take into account your plug loads, your lighting loads. All of that is built into the software. There are some assumptions made in the software. The software is a design tool. It's not perfect. You can't tell it that you have 20 Energy Star TVs or whatever. So I think that is a limitation of the software, and the hope is that when you're actually designing your projects and you're working with your whole team and you're having these conversations at the beginning, you're sizing your PV system appropriately. But there are assumptions that in the software that do account for all of your lighting and lamps that you might plug in.
Right.
Yeah.
The point I wanted to make is, are those assumptions keeping up with our own behavior, that we have more and more electric cars, and we need a TV in every room, and everybody needs 2 computers, and these things. I mean, is that, since we're talking about carbon neutrality, so we have to talk about, how do you take care of...
Yeah, how do you actually get there?
Right.
We were fortunate enough to have our last panelist join us over here. And I know she's an energy modeling expert. Maybe she can respond. Are the assumptions built into the energy software for plug load, are they evolving? Are they accurate? Are we looking at them? And this is Ruby, by the way.
I'm Ruby. Hello. They are trying to keep up with what, hopefully not having a TV in every room, but what they're seeing on the average of plug loads within homes. And that is actually in the model itself. Unfortunately, we cannot actually go in and, like Joel said, manipulate how many TVs or what the actual plug load would be. But we can manipulate your appliances. So if you have like an Energy Star refrigerator dishwasher, those things we can actually manipulate in the model. But that's actually room for discussion when we start looking at what the modeling software is going to be for 2019. Should that be included? Because that's something that's becoming more of an issue nowadays. But for the most part, it is calculating an overall what the baseline would be that they're seeing being used. So it is being up to what it is up to par now. Yeah.
And it's, when you're building, and a lot of people in this room might know, when you're building to try to be, I shouldn't say actual, but net zero, actual kilowatt hours in, kilowatt hours out. The cities right now, people may know, designing a project that's going to be an extension to our city hall where we're targeting some pretty aggressive sustainability goals, one of them being net zero, and we're using the Living Future Institute definition of net zero, which is kilowatt hours in, kilowatt hours out, and it's not based on a model. We're going to have to show them a year's worth of bills, so we're going to actually have to get there. So in that design process, we're looking at what is the desk of a Santa Monica worker looking like in 2021? What phone are they using? How are they charging it? We're asking Apple and Samsung how efficient they think their phones are going to be in those years. Because we're using some pretty passive heating and cooling systems, we're going to be providing a lot of our workstations with fans, and we're maybe even anticipating space heaters. So we're trying to figure out the efficiency of those items. So there are ways to really dig into the plug load if you really want to. But the way the modeling software works, and of course regulation is always a little bit behind the leading edge of the industry, we can't really take credit for benefits we get now if we chose plug load strategies. And there's probably a lot of projects that are overusing electricity from their plug loads compared to what the modeling software thinks. Yeah, it's a great question though. Hey, in the back.
Is there a storage component to this that you build in? You're generating electricity with your PVs and the off-peak or peak periods. Do you have a storage component that's been thought of?
That's a great question, and it's something CEC is looking at and knows that storage is an important component of all of our ZNE and PV goals. It's not something we considered for the city's Reach Code ordinance.
Yeah. So, like what Megan said, it's not in 2016, but CEC is definitely very interested in it for the 2019 code cycle, which is the next code cycle. They're actively looking at battery storage as the way to actually get to the EDR of 0. So, gentlemen over here brought up CEC kind of redefining ZNE and with solar and the changing of the duct curve and all that stuff. Right now, the CEC is really looking at battery storage as the answer to this whole dilemma. So this is very, very much in the works right now. CEC is actively looking into it, and you should expect battery storage to be included in the next residential code cycle.
I think we had, you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just came here late. I was wondering, the modeling software, could you just mention which one it is that you're using?
Sure. So for this analysis, we used CABEC Res and CABEC Com. Those are the free, publicly available versions of the CEC approved software. There are other versions, and if you go to CEC website and look for approved software, there's a whole list of them available. Energy Pro is a really popular one. IES is also popular.
Go back to Living Building Challenge. Our Living Building Challenge project is under construction now, so we are going to be basing that first year of operation with the feedback loop to our users. This is how much we generate on our PV. This is your budget to not exceed over the course of the year as far as your use, and with operable windows and use computers and other plug devices. They'll get that feedback so that they can live that way. And I think that maybe some of the things that should go into future design is the ability to have the monitoring and feedback loop so that the user group knows that they're trying to achieve zero net energy or carbon neutrality in the project, that how much they generate for that year and how much their budget is to spend for the year.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you to CSUN paving the way. Living Building.
Well, we started at the same time, but we had a smaller project, and it's going well. Construction should open in September.
Yeah, that's great.
What's the
It's Zero Net Energy Sustainability Center. It's a small office building adjacent to a covered recycling. Cal State Northridge, come out, your taxpayer dollars at work.
We got a question from the crazy professor in the back. I think he behind you. Yeah.
Crazy professor. Thank you, Joe. The multifamily commercial, I thought I saw a slide up there. There's a requirement for solar on that roof. How does that value get divvied to the tenants? Is that something virtual net metering comes into play, or are we doing community solar? How's that going to work?
Our goal now, or at least our focus, and this is my colleague Garrett works on our climate energy program, is we have a virtual net metering pilot program that we're actively engaging multifamily building owners to help us pilot. We have staff and resources ready and willing to hold hands through the process. So if you guys know multifamily buildings in Santa Monica that might be open to a conversation about making their building more efficient and then saving themselves money by selling that power to their tenants and then their tenants lowering their bills, it's a win-win across the board for this virtual net metering conversation. But yeah, it's something the city is encouraging and incentivizing and providing resources for, but we can't really dictate at the moment. So the reason we chose 2 watts per square foot of the building footprint was specifically for this reason, because we were concerned there wouldn't be virtual net metering and that the new building owners would cry that we're requiring them to install a stranded asset, something that they can't get in return from. And we've estimated that at the 2 watt per square foot of an average high-rise multifamily project in Santa Monica, at least what we've seen over the past few years, we should be around just meeting their common area load with that 2 watt per square foot. There's been people, and this is the nature of working in Santa Monica, I don't get calls from building owners complaining about the reach codes. I get calls from citizens saying, why isn't every building in the city net zero already? So some people have argued, why'd you stop at 2 watts per square foot, or why didn't you have a more stringent requirement? We do have to be appropriate across the board to everybody we serve in the community. I'll go back to you. You already went. Sorry, back there. Yeah, you, please.
Okay, I was just curious, is there a point for a remodel for an existing building that would trigger having zero net energy applied to it?
Yeah, so you came in a little late. This is intended for new construction. However, new construction is triggered by our zoning definition of demolition. So anything that's demoed, which is triggered when 50% of the exterior walls are knocked down, then becomes new in the eyes of our regulations. Over there.
So in terms of reaching ZNE, you said that you guys are using 2016 code, which doesn't include energy storage. How do you guys reach the ZNE during the night, for example? Do you guys plan on having excess power generation during the day and then having it balance out with the night, the electricity used at night?
Yeah, it's more of a yearly budget. I'll let Megan answer that more.
Yeah, so the way that the definition works is you are, at the end of the year, annually, as much energy as you have used in your home, you have produced through your PV system. And it's not just based off of kilowatt hours and therms. It's using the state's metric, which is time-dependent valuation. So at night, you don't have a lot of energy use on the residential sector. So most of your energy use is during the day, and you're also producing most of your PV electricity during the day. So annually, if those values equal out, then you have reached zero net energy.
Is there any coupling to developers with multiple projects, or how is one project at a time?
Another great question. Ideally in the future we'll be encouraging district level planning of energy storage and sharing and generation. But at the moment, the way this is being implemented is on a site-by-site basis. Karen, go ahead. Yeah.
If a home is designed, and this is intended, the ZNE to offset all energy use, including gas and propane. So if a home is designed with gas cooking and gas water heating, and maybe gas building heating, might they be producing more PV power than they're using?
Yes, they probably will. And that's part of what's happening with the 2019 transition.
Will the net metering, will there be a payback for that?
You want to handle that, Megan? Or maybe our gas representative can help over there?
So net metering is strictly an electric utility thing. So that's where it gets kind of fuzzy, because TDV is gas and electric. And so when you're sizing your solar panels according to the CEC definition of zero net energy, you're correct. You're covering both your electric and gas usage. But the money that you could potentially get from net energy metering is only based on your actual electric energy usage.
And I think, I don't know, Megan, can you expand in that the CEC is considering changing that for 2019? Or Chris, maybe both of you? But not sizing the PV specifically electric load, right? And not over PV generation. Gas.
Them too will not allow you to oversize your system.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are rules around how much you can oversize your system on residential, well, both, I believe. And that is the exact question that CEC is looking at for 2019 and beyond is if every home is over-generating because they're sizing their PV to, and business, sizing their PV to offset gas, are we going to have now this influx of generation from our rooftop solar panels? And that is sort of the drive of why CEC is kind of reconsidering taking a step back and saying maybe we should just look at the electric usage of the home to meet 2019 goals.
You can mention solar still.
So we have Gary Schuschner over here, another Edison rep.
So one of the issues is there has been occasions in California where we've reached solar spill conditions where we're over-generating with solar and have basically no use for the energy.
Yeah, so
this is why it's driving a lot of this. We used to have, before our long-term drought, conditions called hydro spill, where we used to spill the water over the dam instead of running generators, and we're seeing the same thing with wind and solar.
yeah, and that's one of the problems, again, going back to how we're defining things. So the ZNE concept is based on your annual usage. Well, in real life, the grid operates hour by hour. So you could potentially be in this scenario where annually we might be okay, but a hot summer day or a certain period of the year we might be over-generating way too much, and which poses a lot of problems to grid stability, transformers blowing up, things like that.
And that's where battery storage comes in and fixes all the problems, right?
And I think this is one of the specific examples where CEC is learning from what's happening in Santa Monica through development. Yeah. And I know we're reaching 7:30, so I'm happy to stay and answer questions. And I'm gonna tell these guys that they're happy to answer questions. But
Do you have a flight?
Obviously, we're done when everyone feels like leaving. So we'll go for another 10 minutes or so. If you guys are okay with that.
So is there going to be any kind of monitoring of these new construction to actually see if they even meet the, so you talked about the overgeneration, but what about undergeneration? If they're not actually meeting even the TDD definition of zero net energy once that building is actually built, and are there any consequences? So is there any monitoring, are there any consequences what happens when these homes are built? If it's built and we go, or?
Yeah, that's kind of the way it works. The way the city operates now, we analyze the building's performance based on the predicted model, and we hope it operates as efficiently as possible. But we don't have any existing tools from the city's standpoint for monitoring existing buildings' energy usage. Now, that's probably the next frontier of our office's work on energy efficiency. We think we've done enough here on energy efficiency for new construction, and we'll probably be following the City of Los Angeles' lead shortly in implementing something that allows us to investigate the existing building performance moving forward.
Residential and commercial, or just commercial?
That's to be developed. It probably won't be residential, at least in its first phase. Cassie?
So the ZNE definition that you guys are using does include natural gas, and so is there a place for solar thermal in this, or are you just encouraging PV only? Does the solar thermal help towards this 1.5 or 2 watts per square foot?
Definitely includes natural gas, and Megan, you can answer solar thermal question.
Yeah, so solar thermal can go in the software, and it directly reduces only your domestic hot water usage. and it's not, so it will, if you put on solar thermal, the state actually considers it an energy efficiency measure, and it can help you meet your 15%. So you can do solar thermal, meet your 15%, reduce your domestic hot water usage, and then install PV to meet the EDR 0.
Okay,
So yeah,
it's sort
it
of-
indirectly reduces the solar. the
Okay.
PV.
But is it independent of the solar requirement?
Yes. And specific to the single-family solar requirement, we're going to monitor it closely in the first few projects we see, but we think the solar requirement for single-family residential, now that we have ZNE, is probably unnecessary.
Was there consideration as far as the price points of the 15% below? Because we're currently doing a couple of battery projects right now, and it just completely blows the whole model out as far as on a cost basis. You know,
It blows it out, makes it way too expensive.
yeah, I mean, you know, we're doing, it doubles the cost of a solar install or more
To do storage.
to do storage. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're using VRLAs and a lithium ion right now. But,
Well, we didn't look at, storage wasn't part of our analysis.
right, she had mentioned though that it was,
And maybe that's why, it's because there's no way it's being considered as cost effective yet, but it sounds like because of its trajectory of price drop like the PV installation, maybe now that's why they can start considering it statewide.
possible.
You know, Megan, is that the case?
I don't know much about what's going on with battery storage. Yeah.
So yeah, the projection is that it will be cost effective. So by statute, anything that goes into Title 24, the California Energy Code, has to be cost effectiveness. So so there's, you know, the CEC can't push something into code that, you know, based on their cost effective analysis isn't cost effective. So.
And there are rebates for residential storage systems, but they're a
They're
little bit,
going out.
a little bit limited, yeah.
Yeah.
They go out.
But, you know, they're requiring you serve meters, so it's crazy what we're actually finding that they're requiring.
And the other question that comes to my mind is, are these projects where you're putting in the battery storage, is it, what's the reason behind it? Is it just strictly for backup emergency power?
In Malibu, just reliability of the grid.
Or to
going down.
avoid feed tariff. If you can get completely off the grid and you can generate and store there without having to run it back through, and,
Yeah,
it's
so-
hard to LADWP, you know, as a provider, it's really difficult to work with.
Yeah, so I can, I'm pretty sure that when the CEC starts looking at battery storage, they're not going to look at it from that perspective. They're going to look at it from the perspective of what's the minimum amount of battery storage you need to meet ZNE, which is different than I think most homeowners see as far as battery storage. They're looking at it from a backup power, you know, I want to be completely off the grid, but I'm pretty sure that the CEC is not going to look at it from that standpoint, and therefore what they'll probably end up recommending is a much smaller battery that goes into your home just so that you can be ZNE
So we're not
cost-effective.
seeing too much load shading at all right now. You know, pretty much it's all backup. It can be programmed to do load shading. But we haven't seen that application.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing that the utilities are actively looking into is smart batteries, which battery backup that's able to send and receive signals from the utility. So in that way, there can be better grid harmonization with ZNE and sustainability goals, but yet at the same time be grid friendly and you're not having transformers blow up
Technically
down the
we're
street.
there, but it hasn't been plugged.
Yeah.
I think we'll do one more question.
Question for Chris is, my understanding is when the grid goes down, the PV panels are worthless. Is there any progress being made on that, because there's real resilience benefits there?
Yeah, so you are correct. The inverters do shut off when it senses that the grid is down. There are advancements in inverter technology. They're called smart inverters. So these are able to, based on whatever scenario, are able to direct the solar energy in appropriate ways. So
they can basically island the building, right? Is that what they call it?
We've got that in Congress right now.
yeah.
And we're looking at that for our city services project, because it's going to be an essential services building. If the grid goes down, if there's an emergency, this needs to be a place of operation for the city, so it makes a lot of sense to use our zero net energy grid there in the Pacific Center. Well, this was as lively of a conversation as we could have hoped for. Thanks for the feedback and the questions. Thank you all for attending, and please thank our panelists for being here.